and I took Lake City by quote-unquote $1 billion in the play-in game.
On the North Idaho Prepcast, we're all about that North Idaho life.
Man, you talk about Wallace and what they've been able to do this year. Quietly just being, the steady stalwart up north in District 1. They've been dominant.
From Bonners Ferry all the way down to Grangeville, we tackle the biggest stories in North Idaho sports.
This Genesee team is for real. We know we saw it last year. They're I think in the driver's seat to repeat.
It's the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs. That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. We are coming to you live at 10:20 a.m. on Wednesday, December 12th. Actually, Thursday, December 12th, 2024. If you're watching live, thanks for being with us. If you aren't live, no worries. You can watch this anytime on replay at the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, X account. You can also listen to the North Idaho Prepcast at IdahoSports.com and wherever you download and subscribe to your podcasts. My name is Brandon Baney. Let's bring in our North Idaho expert, Ryan Scaggs. Yo, what's up, Scaggs?
Not much. Just living the dream, man.
Yeah. Tick-tock goes the clock. Here's Sam Buffington on Twitter, on X. You guys are 20 minutes late. Yeah.
So I didn't check in with the boss there.
It's not a hard 10. Sometimes things get a little chaotic. Hey, our good friend Max Oswald from the Bonner County Daily Bee in the chat as well. Good morning, Max. Great to see you. We should honestly, one of these weeks, because Max's profile picture is him talking into a microphone. I know he has some radio.
He's got chops.
Yeah, we should do a show with him sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let him he can take over one week. Absolutely. Give him the keys to the car.
Yeah.
Let him cook.
Yeah, we'll do a Max and Ryan special, and I'll just be in the background getting it set up. Sam wants Sam wants to know, do we have a tardy pass? No. You know what happened in high school? I really, because I was late a lot for class. I relied on my wit, charm, and personality to talk my way out of too many tardies or absences. It generally worked out pretty well, and that's when I thought, maybe I've got a future in this whole communications thing.
Work your way out of it. Yeah, I got stories too. My mom was in the office when I was in high school, and I selected to be her office aide one year, and my senior year, I was injured, and so I was on crutches and stuff. And it was, not being able to do sports and being a squirrely senior and things of that nature. I would pull my friends out of class once in a while with like fake slips to go to the office to talk to the secretary or something about something. And one day he get on the intercom. My mom had found out that I pulled somebody from class before a quiz, and then I hear my full name announced over the intercom. To come to the office immediately. So I knew I'd been caught. But yeah, that was one funny story from my high school days.
Oh man, a classic moment to be sure. Here is Bethany in the chat as well. Good morning from North Idaho. Hey Bethany, where are you watching from? Specifically in North Idaho. Ryan and I both live in Coeur d'Alene. So we're always curious, where people are tuning in from, if you want to let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we will get to the show. Ryan, it's going to be mostly boys basketball previews. We did this last week with girls basketball, kind of outlined the biggest storylines and players and coaches and league races to keep an eye on this season. But before we get to that for boys basketball, wrestling did kick off this past weekend. There were some incredible performances, I know, from Lakeland and Post Falls on the boys' side right out of the gate, and the Sandpoint girls came out gangbusters as well. And here it is, Bethany watching in Post Falls. It was a big weekend for Post Falls wrestling.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they did great over in Sidney, Montana. Great showing, a very tough opening season tournament. And I mean, we talk about tournaments. We had the mat chat, obviously, earlier this week, but one of the marquee events in the state of Idaho is taking place this weekend in Coeur d'Alene. So there's been a whole lot of hoopla over some of the North Idaho teams coming into that tournament. Lakeland, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, all seem to be cooking early on. And there's going to be some great action inside the gym at NIC this weekend at that Tri-State tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun tri-state. It's always Washington, Idaho, Montana's best. Post Falls went over and won the Sydney Eagles Classic for the second consecutive year. Sydney is kind of like one of the premier wrestling powerhouse programs in Montana. Bethany in the chat says, gearing up for Tri-State. Her kiddo took the 175 class at Sydney. Yes, and that is going to be really exciting to see how Post Falls, can they stack these early season wins in wrestling. Lakeland, meanwhile, went the opposite direction. They went over to Spokane for the Inland Empire League Classic and did extremely well over there.
Yeah, and they kind of changed the format. Typically, it had been a bracketed 12 or 16-man tournament. This year, I think it went to duels, and Lakeland went over there and showed out. I mean, beating Meade, Central Valley, University, a number of schools from the Greater Spokane League, and great showing. Lakeland's been looking really strong early on. I know they wrestled last night against Coeur d'Alene and lost in the duel, in a tough fought duel with the Vikings last night. They did defeat Lake City last night as well. So there's, that Lakeland team at 5A is going to be a force to watch. I mean, that lineup's been hotter than a pistol, and so they're going to get some big ones this year out of their lineup. And Post Falls is going to be really good too. Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls 1 and 2 in the IEL and the 6A ranks. I mean, I look at those two, and it's going to be an absolute dogfight this year. I think you're going to see the Vikings and Trojans going at it in a number of tournaments this year as you get into semis and final matches. There's going to be a lot of matchups between those two schools will become very familiar with each other's lineups this year.
Yep. So Lakeland, it's more of a dual format now over at the IEL. Lakeland went 4-0 in their duels and won the title, which is awesome. And then the Sandpoint girls also came out at the Blizzard invite and competed really well. We're very fortunate. You mentioned the Matt Chat Prepcast. That is our standalone wrestling only podcast we do throughout high school wrestling season on IdahoSports.com. All of these same destinations that you're listening to the North Idaho Prepcast on. We do that every Tuesday night at 7:00 Pacific time live, and we get such good interaction and engagement from the wrestling community. And we're very excited to announce, we announced this on Tuesday night, but joining our panel of experts this year is the girls wrestling coach from Sandpoint High School and Middle School, Val Johansson. And we had her on Tuesday night. She was great. She took a lot of tough questions about girls wrestling, and she is going to be because we wanted somebody who is really in girls wrestling to be kind of that advocate, and Val did a great job.
So. And it's a sport that's absolutely blown up too. I mean, you look at, I think participation for the third straight year is up with girls wrestling in the state of Idaho, and it's just one of those sports that only continues to grow nationally too. I think it's one of the fastest growing high school sanctioned sports in the country, which is awesome to see. I mean, it's only going to get bigger. And you look at states, and being a kid from Clarkston and coaching in the state of Washington and wrestling that I had in that background, when they brought in the girls state tournament, I remember the first year they hosted it and held it. And, they went from 2 mats. I think they've got 6 mats and 16 girl brackets at state in Washington. And it's one of the largest girls state tournaments in the country now. And Idaho's, nipping on their heels competition wise, and the quality of wrestler that we're getting out of the Gem State is awesome to see, and it's only growing, and hopefully it just continues to go up and up for years to come.
Yep. So that, again, the Matt Chat Prepcast, our standalone wrestling podcast we do. And here's Max Oswald in the chat. We're talking about Val Johansson from Sandpoint. She's a gem of a person. Yeah, she's excellent. Everything we could have asked for and more in terms of being our girls wrestling expert on the Matt Chat Prepcast.
Well, you look at that whole panel. Between Val and then you throw in Zollinger and Al Fontes. Good grief. You've got 3 great minds in the sport of wrestling in the state of Idaho, and what you're able to, and then you usually ticking people off, and then you hear it in the comments if you've mentioned basketball or something like that, they let you have it, which is, I think it's an awesome touch. I think you bring it on purpose a little bit, which is kind of fun, but it's an entertaining watch, and to get a chance to listen to it after the fact, if you don't get a chance to watch it live on Tuesday nights, that's an awesome Prepcast.
Yeah, 3 experts and a stooge is what that's the format of the show. I'm the stooge. I'm kind of the everyman, common man out there. It's a lot of fun for sure. Okay, speaking of basketball, let's get into our boys basketball previews here. We released our boys basketball statewide previews on IdahoSports.com earlier this week. We've got previews for every single conference. We've got something to say about every single basketball team in the state of Idaho. You can still read those at the top of the homepage at IdahoSports.com. We also had our preseason coaches polls. We asked each coach how their league race might shake out. You can find those on the homepage at IdahoSports.com as well. And so we'll reference those preseason polls and then give you some storylines here as we work our way from 6A down to 1A. So let's start in 6A, Ryan, with the Inland Empire League. Just a 3-team affair this year. Lewiston drops down to 5A. Coeur d'Alene was picked number 1 in our preseason coaches poll. Lake City 2, Post Falls 3. That's how they finished up last year. Coeur d'Alene comes in with the nod as a team that almost got to the state championship game. Alex Coe from Timberline put a dagger in their hearts in the state semis last year in overtime. This is a Vikings team that's motivated to get back.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at what the pieces that they bring back. I mean, there's a lot of parts that are there that, you know, they can flat shoot the ball. They play really nice basketball, complementary to each other and what they possess skill-wise. They've got nice pieces. Caden Simmons, one of the best players in the state of Idaho on the hardwood. But you look at the other pieces around him too, and great coaching from Coach Adams. That is a really tough group. This conference as a whole, I mean, I look at it, you know, you only got 3 teams, but man, the 3 teams that you have and the talent level within this league is crazy. I mean, Coeur d'Alene, we know how close they were to playing for a state championship last year, but you look at, you know, Lake City and what they bring back lineup-wise with that group. There's a ton of talent there. Post Falls returns a ton of talent from a team that we've been seeing grow up before our eyes. They were super young 3 years ago, and we just keep watching them get better and better each year. Is this the year that they can finally get the monkey off their back and punch their ticket into the tournament and unseat, you know, either Lake City or Coeur d'Alene and find their way to state? But, you know, top to bottom, this league is just very, very deep. I think Coeur d'Alene would have the odds-on favorite, at least in my opinion, to repeat as league champs. There's just a ton of firepower with that Vikings team. They're able to play inside. They can play outside and shoot the lights out on any given night. Great guard play, but they play really, really stingy defense too, and I think that's what's going to bode well as you get later in the season.
Yep. One other storyline to watch, Post Falls coach Mike McLean entering his 18th and final season as the Trojans coach, announced his intentions to retire. He has been one of the best basketball coaches in the state of Idaho, took Post Falls to state several times, won a championship. And so even though Post Falls has been down a little bit, you know, Coach McLean is the kind of guy that'll take a C+ player and turn him into a B- or a B. He absolutely just gets the most out of his guys.
Yeah, and you look at, I mean, we've talked about it too, just looking at his staff. I mean, he's got Jason Ulrich as one of his assistant coaches who did a marvelous job at Lewiston High School for all those years. And so, you know, is there an heir apparent situation coming up next year? Is Ulrich going to get the keys to the car, or are they going to hire outside? I don't know. But I mean, it's just, you look at, you know, those programs, and Coach McLean does such a great job, and he's done a phenomenal job at Post Falls for so many years with just competitive teams and getting the most out of the kids, just like you said. You know, if you look at coaching top to bottom within a conference, I know it's a small conference, but I don't know if there's any better coaching in the state of Idaho at this level that we might have in the IEL between these 3 guys.
Look at you already fanning the flames of rumors, innuendo, and speculation. Jeez, let's just let.
Hey, I'm not saying rumors. I would love to see Jason be the coach of Post Falls. I like Jason as a person. He's an awesome guy. He's a 10 out of 10 person. To steal that from Spencer Danielson at Boise State, he always says that about his players. But yeah, Jason's just an awesome guy, and Coach McLean's a great person too, and a great coach. You know, so I'd love to see Post Falls get over the hump this year in his final year with that lineup. I mean, there's so many, you know, just gritty players on that roster. There's too much talent there to not find a season of success. So like I said, this 3-team conference, top to bottom, their rankings are going to be in the top 12, all 3, in my opinion, all season long.
Yeah, it's going to be a fierce fight, no doubt about it. Okay, 5A Inland Empire League, Sandpoint, Lakeland, Moscow, all kind of took turns being in the driver's seat last year. Hey, who wants this thing? It's Lakeland's week. And then Moscow took first place. And then ultimately Sandpoint goes on a Cinderella run at districts. knocks Moscow down a couple of times to advance to state. They were the plucky upstart Bulldogs a season ago. Kind of a young team. Only one senior. Really good senior, though, in Parker Childs. He's now gone. And so because of that, because of the uncertainty with all three of those teams last year, and nobody really grabbed this league by the reins, everyone kind of deferred to Lewiston dropping down from 6A. So Lewiston is number 1 in our preseason poll. Lakeland 2, Sandpoint 3, Moscow 4. What are your early assessments of this 5A Inland Empire League?
I think it's going to be competitive. I mean, I think Lakeland's going to be better than people think, just based on the pieces. They got Jace Taylor that turned out this year that he didn't play last year. They've got, some good athletes on the hardwood. They're a team that could surprise some folks. I really look at Lakeland being competitive. Lewiston's going to be good. Bogar and Fisher are two very, very good ball players for the Bengals coming down from 6A. There's no nights off in this conference. And I look at Sandpoint could surprise people too. They've got size, 6'5", 6'7" down low, and another 6'7" in the paint as well. So they've got 3 dudes over 6'4" in that lineup. They can give some teams some fits. Can the Bulldogs? So it'll be interesting to see. And then you've got obviously Moscow. They've got some nice pieces as well with Abendroth and Cummings in their lineup. So I don't ever want to say a conference is a pick 'em, but as far as what's on paper right now at the beginning of the season, you look at this conference and it's kind of like shrug your shoulders and go, I don't know. Lewiston, I think, with what they had getting the edge, I think some of the coaches might not want to, be homers and pick their own team maybe. But I would say any one of these teams has the chance to win this conference realistically, just based on what they bring back.
Yeah, I know one guy that Lewiston coach Brooks Malm is really excited about is Blaze Hepburn.
Yep.
He is a sophomore, going to kind of take over the point guard position for the Bengals. And Lewiston already performing pretty well. They hosted that Diamond Shop showcase last week where we had some really good Kendrick, St. Mary's, Moscow, Lewiston, where Sandpoint came over to compete in that as well. And so Lewiston gets the early nod there. This one, the next one we're going to talk about, 4A Intermountain League, District 1. This one fairly clear cut. Bonners Ferry comes in as the defending, not just the defending IML champs, but the defending state champs. First basketball title in school history last year. Magical season, and yet a lot of those guys are back. Can Bonners Ferry run it back? They were picked 1. Timberlake was picked 2 in this 2-team league.
Yeah, and I look at Bonners Ferry. I don't know how much more you can say than what we said last year, and it's like, you look at the lineup returning and the pieces are all there. I mean, it all fits. They still have size down low. They've got great guard play. They've got Williams. I mean, you got the best player in my mind, one of the top 3 players in the state of Idaho at any classification. Realistically, that they're going to be right in the mix. And I think, and not just in the mix to win it all in the conference, they're going to be right in the mix to win it all again and repeat as state champions. They've got all the pieces there. They've got the coaching. You just look at what's there. There's a lot of talent still around, walking the halls of Bonners Ferry. So, the Badgers, in my mind, are the team to beat, obviously, in conference, but they're going to be probably right there in the top 3 in state.
Yep. They did lose one guy to graduation, Trey Bateman, 6'2" post, but they bring back all those great guards. Brody Rice at point guard, Thomas Bateman, Asher Williams, as you mentioned. Peyton Hinthorn was the 6th man last year as a freshman. He's now a sophomore. Eli Blackmore is back. And Sule Abubakare. That's going to be a guy you're going to
keep an eye on. Yeah, he's a dude. He is a big body. That's going to be the X factor, in my opinion, on the defensive end. He can slam the door shut in the lane.
Yep, that is Asha Abubakare. She was a great 3-sport athlete for Bonners Ferry. Now at Fresno State doing track and field. This is Asha's younger brother, Sule. He is a junior 6'7" wing/post. Has some really good ball skills. That's going to be a guy you're going to want to keep an eye on this year. What about Timberlake? What can Timberlake do? I mean, they have to beat Bonners Ferry. That's the bottom line.
Bottom line. They've got a good player of their own right too. I mean, they've got some talent in their lineup too, but I think as a team, Bonners Ferry just plays so well as a whole that that's going to be a lot to overcome just because you can bring so many guys off the bench. But Timberlake comes into this one. They didn't have the season they wanted last year, going 6-16. But you got Tyler Engelson. He's one of those players in the state of Idaho that people start to take notice of, and he's a great player in his own right. Max Simpson and Dykeman also pretty good players for the Tigers. But Engelson's that straw that stirs the drink. So as he goes, they're going to go and kind of follow him. So it'll be interesting to see how Timberlake, if they can improve on what they did last year, they're going to have a chance. But kind of as you look at it right now, it's Bonners Ferry's league to win.
Yep, totally agree. Okay, let's go to the 3A Central Idaho League, where it's incredible what Brian Chase has been able to do in 10 years at St. Mary's. 10 district championships, 9 opening round wins. Last year they lost in the opening round. That snapped a 9-year streak of getting to at least the semifinals. So 9 out of 10 times they've been in the semis. 6 of the 10 times they've played for the championship. And then, they won the championship a couple of years ago. And so the question is, but St. Mary's, the gap is closing between St. Mary's and the field. Last year, Orofino even beat St. Mary's in a midseason matchup. And so when we look at our preseason poll for this league, coaches are pretty split. They actually picked Orofino and St. Mary's in a 2-way tie for first. Kellogg and Priest River picked in a 2-way tie for third. Grangeville, starting 5 sophomores this year, picked 5th. What do you think? Can Orofino catch St. Mary's this year?
Realistically, yeah. I mean, St. Mary's brings back some nice pieces. Obviously, we talked about it. They've got, coming back this year, they've got Barta and Year out back in that lineup that, the team that went to state last year. But Orofino, they've got talent. I mean, Naranjo, and then you've got Olive down low, 6'4" guy in the post, and Runia. And there's some nice pieces there running the floor for Orofino. I think that they can take over games at times too. So it'll be really, I think the coaches know probably better than us, just based on what they see and what they saw last year coming back. That's going to be a group that's going to be hanging around and be pesky. I look at the field too, and you look at teams like Priest River returning some great athletes. They've got some guys coming in. Priest River is going to be a team to keep an eye on. They really will be. Lucas Matthews, going to be one of those dudes for the Spartans that I think can play. Sawyer Stout, we obviously know about what he did on the football field this year, but you've got Krieger and Cook. There's some nice pieces in there, along with Coleman that was an all-league selection last year for Priest River. And then you take in Kellogg. Kellogg's got some nice pieces coming back as well. They only lost 3 guys to graduation, but McDonald, he's a great athlete. He can stretch the floor. And then obviously Porter Lewis, that sophomore at guard. It's going to be kind of up to see how they handle the ball and protect it on the offensive end. The turnovers, I know, kind of spelled doom for a number of these teams last year. I think it's going to be more balanced than people think, because Grangeville, they're starting a whole slug of sophomores, but they're all great athletes. And you see names and you see them, and you're like, oh, I know that last name, like Thacker. Huh. Okay, where have I heard that name? Well, his sister, obviously. We know what she's been able to do on the hardwood for the Bulldogs. We know that all these kids can play. And so I think this, as far as, a larger conference with a number of teams, the balance is competitively night in, night out. I think there's not really too much of a difference between 1 through 6 in this conference.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tight at the top. It'll be fascinating to see. But to me, I'm with you. Priest River is certainly a team to keep an eye on as a sleeper as well. Absolutely. Okay, let's go 2A. Let's start with the Scenic Idaho Conference up in District 1. Lakeside won this league last year. They laughably had to win a state play-in game to get to state. And from there, they, of course, got all the way to the championship, where they fell to Lapway in a close contest. Lakeside looks pretty good again. Now, they did lose. I mean, they bring back Tyson Charlie, the MVP of the league, outstanding junior, can do pretty much anything he wants to with the basketball. They lost pretty much every other starter. You think of Liam Hendricks and Blaze Callahan, and you think of Brutus Syjon. But Lakeside always seems to just reload, and they've got some new dudes this year that are already starting to ball out.
Yeah, I mean, they played Lapway early on and dismantled the Wildcats. And, so you look at, I don't know what people are going to think. We'll talk about Lapway here in a minute, but this Lakeside team, I mean, I'm realistically, until somebody knocks them off, they're your favorite, and they have to be. Tyson Charlie is one of those guys who can go off for, 30 on any night. And, you got Jalapeno in the lineup, played really well against Lapwai. Preston Spotted Horses there as well. They were both reserves last year, but you saw them get some playing time. And then you got other guys in the lineup too, Laurel Mitchell, who's 6'4", and Jaden Plouffe, who's going to be a decent player for them as well. He's 6'2" sophomore. Coach Two-Teeth, you just can't count out any one of his teams. And I think that they're going to make a play this year for another deep run at state. If anybody's going to push him in conference, I realistically see it being Wallace, just with athletes and Julian Davis. We talk about him. He may be one of the better players in the conference alongside Tyson Charlie. So we'll see what the conference can do. And then maybe Cooper Miller, the freshman, we saw him on the football field, see how that athleticism translates to the hardwood and see if he might be able to be a matchup nightmare for some of these teams as well. And as a freshman, so it's going to be a better conference this year. Genesis Prep's better this year. So we'll see, but I still think odds-on favorites right now in my mind is Lakeside.
Yeah, Lakeside 1, Wallace 2, G Prep 3, Clark Fork 4. That's how our preseason poll shook out. Julian Davis, double machine for Wallace. Genesis Prep has maybe one of the best shooters in Spencer Farrell. He's a really good shooting guard. And then Clark Fork working with 7, I think now up to 8 players, which is good news. But the Wampus Cats, they're going to lean on Everett Montgomery for that senior leadership, but tough order for Clark Fork, moving up from 1A to 2A and being one of the smallest 2A schools in the entire state. New coach at Clark Fork this year and at Genesis Prep, actually. Chris Mullen coaching G Prep. Clark Fork coached by Stillman Berkeley, former assistant. He moves one chair over to the head coaching role.
Not that Chris Mullen. Not the one you're thinking of, not NBA Chris Mullen, but yeah.
Yeah, not Golden State Warriors Chris Mullen. No, this is Mullen Chris Mullen, not IN. Okay, White Pine League. Lapwai lost a lot. All the starters, most of the key reserves, they are hitting the reset button. Because of that, Lapwai was picked 5th in our preseason coaches poll in the White Pine League. Kamei was 1st, Logos 2nd, Kendrick 3rd, Potlatch 4, Lapwai 5, Prairie 6, Troy 7. Maybe Lapwai can play their way into that upper group as the season progresses. I mean, they did play Logos. Logos only won by 10. But to me, that top 4, Kamei, Logos, Kendrick, Potlatch, they're going to be duking it out all year.
Yep, and I was saying, I think it was the Sam Buffington was asking me a few weeks ago, like, hey, who you like in the White Pine? I'm like, I like Kamei, and he's like, to win it? And I go, to win it all. I think this Kamei team with firepower, what they got, this is, if you want to talk about the Cubs, they are loaded that they could make a run at a state championship this year. I know that Lakeside's got plans, Potlatch has plans too, but you look at guys, Dave Clue and Jaden Crow with Kamei. I mean, you talk about a nice 1-2 punch for Kamei in their lineup. You throw in the coaching as well. This Kamei team, if you circle any years, this year might be their year to go ahead and make a run at that state championship. Clute's a matchup nightmare. He's 6'6", but he can play like a point guard. So there's some exciting players in this conference. Kendrick, down their best player, is still, in my mind, probably the second best team. Just based on, ball skills and flow and size. They got a number of guys. It's like their whole lineup seems to be 6'2". It's like 6'2", 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", going across that whole lineup. I mean, if you look at what they bring. Kendrick is going to be a team to keep an eye on. They can continue their winning ways, playing, winning a state championship, playing for another one last year. And then Potlatch is another team that brings back a number of great pieces. I mean, you saw what they did last year at the state tournament, the Lovels, Chase and Everett. I mean, they're 2 great players that the Potlatch Loggers have in their lineup. And then the other one, you want to talk about just pure athletes running the floor, is that Logos team with what they've got in their lineup. They might have the best athlete on athlete lineup in the league. Does it, can it reflect on the basketball floor to putting the ball in the hoop? We'll see. But they obviously knocked off Lapwai, but that's a team defensively. We know that they can switch and they can run the floor like crazy. But a team that gets into a set and matches up with them and can move the ball around, how will they adjust to that? It'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as the season goes on. But I like 1, Kamei, 2, I'm going to take Kendrick, Potlatch, they're going to be right there neck and neck, and then I would go Logos at 4. And then it's everybody else kind of behind that. Prairie's going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on as well. They can make things interesting as well. And then you've got Lapwai Troy. So that's kind of my mix for this year in the White Pine.
Yeah, I think Potlatch gets dinged a little bit because they are missing some key reserves due to football injuries.
Correct.
Jay Marshall, Jacob Keck, who's going to be a big post for them. But with the Lovels, they certainly, the sky's the limit. I had a coach tell me that if Kendrick had Nathan Twite available and healthy, of course he missed all the football season with an injury, that Kendrick would be kind of the overwhelming favorites for the state title in basketball.
Absolutely.
So,
I still think Kendrick can make it to state and place. Can they answer and limit a player like Dave Clue? I mean, that's going to be the question. I think everybody's going to try to solve that puzzle. That's going to be a Rubik's Cube for the entire conference this season to see if they can handcuff David Klutford Kamiak.
Yep. Jason Mara in the chat, basketball today. Yeah, we're talking basketball right now.
We're talking wrestling earlier. Where were you?
Yes, we were talking wrestling earlier. And of course, we have our Bad Chat Prepcast. So, yes.
Yeah.
Again, the rivalry between basketball and wrestling.
Dang pumpkin pushers. Yeah. No.
Exactly. Okay. 1A. Let's wrap up with the 1A. Let's start with the North Star League, where the new guys were picked 1 in our preseason coaches poll, Court of Christ Academy, because Kootenai and Mullen each went, they had a combined 5 wins between them last year, and Court of Christ has athletes. And now this is Court of Christ's first year as an IHSAA official full-fledged member. And it's a lot of the names we heard from football, Grant Clemens and Denke and Greg Hayes and players like that. And Ben Connolly is balling out to start the year. So what do you think? Is it Court of Christ to lose, even though they're the new kid on the block?
Absolutely. I think that they've proven that early on already in the season. Playing an interesting schedule. I mean, we saw them manhandle Kootenai last night, but I mean, they've played well early on, and we saw them in football. They got size, man. They've got guys that are 6'3", 6'4", through their lineup. I mean, they're going to be matchup nightmares, especially teams that are struggling to just get numbers within their conference. I think it is Court of Christ to lose, and this is a team that you don't want to face them in the state tournament. I mean, if they find their way into state, that is a team I don't want to play just because they may not have numbers, but man, the athletes that they've got on the floor, they give you fits for small schools trying to match up with guys that are going 6'3", 6'4" in the front line, but they can pop back out behind the arc and shoot the 3. So this Court of Christ team is a team to realistically keep an eye on. They could be very, very interesting as the season goes on.
Yep. And then for each of Mullen and Kootenai's got Christopher Moore, who's a great double-double candidate. Most nights, not Jason Strobel. That's, oh man, I'm drawing a blank on the first name. Strobel, also a guy to watch for Kootenai. And then for Mullen, really the guy I'm excited about is Mike Morgan, who has been a great center for Mullen's football team the past couple of years. He was one of the few Mullen guys that was on that Mullen St. Regis co-op this year. And he is going to play center for the Tigers basketball team as well. He could be a key factor in this race as we go. Talon Rupp Connors is also a returning all-league player from Mullen.
And I'm sorry, I wanted to apologize and correct that. Court of Christ played Priest-River. It was Genesis Prep that played Kootenai last night. Court of Christ, Connolly for Court of Christ against Priest-River had 23 in the ball game last night. Clemens had 14. And then Hayes had 8. So that's a team, they can play. That's a team to keep an eye on. That Priest-River team's pretty good. So, Sorry, continue.
No, this is the most unpredictable league we're going to wrap up with. The 1A White Pine League, District 2. You lose Kendrick, they move up. That creates this big void. You gain both Genesee and Clearwater Valley. Genesee, a full-fledged move down. They are a 1A school. Clearwater Valley petitioned down for competitive reasons, were granted that. And I'll be honest, the preseason coaches poll was wonky. I mean, there was results up and down. Nez Perce gets the number 1 nod, Deary 2, Clearwater Valley 3, Timberline 4, Highland 5, St. John Bosco 6, Genesee 7. It could go 1 through 7 in any direction. Who finishes number 1 when it's all said and done?
Is it fair to say I have no idea? Because I look at this and you're like, okay, I mean, Highland, they've got size inside. You got Geckner and Watson. And Geckner was a player we saw last year that was really good. I mean, with two 6'4" guys, that's a team to keep an eye on. You know, they could slow teams down. Nespers, you know, we know what they could do. We talked about, you said they were the dark horse with Wilcox and Williams. And gosh, it's hard. Deary, you just look at athletes, they're going to be able to run up and down the floor. I mean, we've always seen, like, what is it? It seems like Death Taxes and Timberline coming out of nowhere and finding their way into the state tournament too. They've got a couple of players in Maverly and Christofferson. So this is a league any given night. You're like, I mean, you could shrug your shoulders and somebody beats someone. And you're like, okay, who wants to be number one? We may not know until district tournament and when it all shakes out, because Clearwater Valley's got players in the tournament. I tend to like Deary's athletes. But I don't know how well that translates onto the basketball floor. But I think as far as best player, you could realistically look at Highland with Geckner down there. And there's, I mean, it's going to be an interesting conference to see who really wants to show up and win this thing by the end. But I mean, I do see Genesee kind of being trailing behind the rest of the field. But St. John Bosco is another team that can make things interesting as well.
Yeah, so Highland had the height last year. They lose Geckner, who's 6'4", but they've got 6'4" Trevor Knowlton. Kind of
that's what I see. Knowlton, not Geckner. Yeah, Knowlton.
Yeah. No, you're totally fine. It's going to be interesting because everybody is rebuilding to some extent in this league, and so Nez Perce kind of brings back the most all league talent from a year ago, and so that's kind of where they're leaning there. Okay, Dan Rudolph Jr. wants to know in the chat, hey, have we done 6A and 5A hoops? Yes, that's where we let off. So, Dan, if you were here a little late, no worries. What you're going to want to do is once we wrap up here, just go back and watch this on replay, and you can find our 6A, 5A basketball discussion that way. But it is time to put the finishing touches on today's show. Ryan, as always, thank you for the time.
Absolutely. No, happy to be here. And then I think next week we will come out with our first round of power rankings. Which will be fun. So I got to comb through stats and results and all that fun stuff. And we got some tournaments coming up as we approach Christmas break. So it'll be fun to keep an eye on things and see how that moves forward. And we will break down Tri-State too in wrestling. There's going to be some great matches that we'll keep an eye on. I'll get a chance to go watch some wrestling tomorrow. I love watching those first couple rounds. You see some nobodies, and there's bound to be some crazy upsets this weekend. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. Basketball, wrestling, and so much more on next week's edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. Until then, for Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on IdahoSports.com.